The White House is on the verge of a bevy of new agreements and deals, and it looks like that trade deal the media told us would never happen between the U.S. and China is about to happen. Quote, the U.S. and China agreed to suspend tariffs for 90 days in a move that shows a major thawing of tensions between the world's two largest economies. The trade agreement means that reciprocal tariffs between both countries will be cut from 125% to 10% after high-stakes talks in Switzerland over the weekend. And just hours after that news was first reported, at 4 a.m. this morning, the Wall Street Journal printing this. Here's the headline: How Tariffs Are Crushing Small Businesses and Nobody in Power Seems to Care. Well, the Wall Street Journal, which just suddenly morphed into the New York Times, writing about how the past few months have apparently been tough on small businesses because of tariffs, really just the last few weeks. But no mention in the Wall Street Journal article about the thousands, if not millions, of businesses that were forced to close forever during the pandemic because of Biden-Harris insanity. Nothing. Instead, a piece about a rough few weeks for small businesses across America. Well, did you see what the stock market did today, Wall Street Journal? Did you see that? What's the Wall Street Journal going to write about if Donald Trump continues to make deals with all the countries that were taking advantage of us when people like Joe Biden were president? What are they going to say then? We'll wait for it. On Friday, it was the United Kingdom. Donald Trump was patient. He told us to be patient, and look what happened. The world did not come to an end. The stock market did not crash. We are not in a depression. We are not in a recession. Everything is okay. The birds are still chirping outside. It is safe again to retire in America. England came to the table late last week, and we now have a trade deal in place that works for England and the United States. How about that, Joe Biden? And every other country is going to do the exact same thing, including China. We are 110 days into Donald Trump's second term, and once again, it looks like Donald Trump was right. And instead of another Ukraine, this time between two countries with nuclear weapons, it looks like the Trump administration played a key role in negotiating a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, as Barack Obama used to say. The fighting started last week, but the White House stepped in and essentially said, cut it out. Stop the fighting. Think about that. Think about how different the world would be today if the Biden administration had even a fraction of that influence when Russia invaded Ukraine. Instead, 1 million people are dead or injured, and the war is now in year number 4. I picked up the New York Times yesterday. You're away for a while, and you're like, I got to get caught up. So I picked up the New York Times yesterday just to see for myself how they were framing all of this. Everything I missed while I was away. And here are some of the headlines. Emmanuel Macron and Vladimir Zelensky, allies and, dare I say it, friends. And this quote made me laugh. The men no longer go through formal diplomatic channels, again, this is the New York Times, but call each other directly on secure lines using WhatsApp and Signal, and they write that without irony. Signal. They use Signal. The New York Times wants Pete Hegseth fired for using Signal, but if it's Emmanuel Macron and Saint Zelensky somehow, well, that's okay. And then I turned the page, and here was the next headline. Watergate-era Washington was less toxic than what it is today. After that, and I'm not kidding, the New York Times yesterday, 6 deadly minutes, how Israeli soldiers killed 15 rescue workers in Gaza. And people actually read the New York Times. And the problem with this is they read it and they believe it. No mention of the really important fact that Hamas attacked Israel. It wasn't the other way around. And the people who live in Gaza actually elected a terrorist organization called Hamas and put them in power. Guess what? You reap what you sow. You voted for these people. They are your elected government until something changes. And you attacked Israel on October the 7th. I'm sorry if you don't like how Israel is responding to that attack. And nothing about the release of Idon Alexander, the last American hostage being held by Hamas. He is free today. We'll have more on this in a moment. This video, tremendously emotional. 580 days in captivity. There he is, hugging his family. Joe Biden left him to rot in Gaza. President Trump on Truth Social overnight writing, "I'm happy to announce that Edon Alexander, an American citizen who had been held hostage since October 2023, is coming home to his family." And after all of that, at 9:30 a.m. this morning, RFK Jr. did something that Joe Biden promised to do for 4 years. He talked about this constantly, but he never actually did it.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. One of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. We now have a president who is a man of his word.
Okay, so directly after that, the New York Times wrote this in what is clearly a message to all their favorite judges on the left who have been so active lately. The message, clear, it's get to work. Here's the quote. "Any such plan will most likely be subject to challenges in court, and it's not clear whether it will pass legal muster, especially without action by Congress." And did you see what happened on Wall Street today? The NASDAQ was up 4.5%, the Dow up 1,100 points. I leave the country for 6 days on assignment. I was not suspended, and I return to a country that is getting better by the day, thanks to a president who continues to do what the experts all say cannot be done. Donald Trump arriving in Saudi Arabia tonight. He's set to touch down in minutes. I wonder if he sleeps when he takes a 15-hour flight. I bet he doesn't. Maybe he does. This is the first international trip since winning back the presidency. I arrived back in the U.S. on Saturday after being on assignment in Rome to cover the conclave. And the more I thought about what I just witnessed when I was over there, just about 100 yards from where this took place, and what it means to have a pope from the United States, just a guy from Chicago, a White Sox fan. He's a Bears fan. He now lives in the Vatican. The more I was reminded of how much the left absolutely hate Catholics and Christians and faith in general, and it's part of the reason they continue to lose. The New York Times yesterday, front page, above the fold, like they used to say. This is the Sunday New York Times. This headline: "The plight of the Pope's Chicago parish is a familiar Catholic lament," which is the story about the church that Pope Leo used to go to 60 years ago when he was a little kid in suburban Chicago. That church apparently closed, which, by the way, is not a story. Churches open and close all the time. The real story is that because of this pope, an American pope, churches are going to start to open again. And not just Catholic churches in the U.S., churches of all faiths are going to open again in the United States because faith is returning. It's returning to the U.S. Young voters, Christian voters, Catholics, all went for Donald Trump in November. There is a reason for that. There is a reason the Pope is an American. I also heard this from Italy. The criticism of Donald Trump when he put out this meme dressed as the Pope. This is, of course, before. We didn't have a Pope when he put this out. We were before pre-conclave. And this is a meme that, by the way, I bet this made Pope Leo laugh. We know, if you were just watching Rob Schmidt tonight, it made his brother laugh for sure. Donald Trump didn't dress up like Jesus. He dressed up as the Pope, a man, fallible. But the media had no problem when a morbidly obese woman dressed up as Jesus depicting a scene from The Last Supper. It's behind that odd fellow in blue, and thank God he's wearing that little loin thing. This big heavyset gal is behind him. And this was during the Olympic opening ceremonies last summer, and the media had no problem with that depiction of The Last Supper. To be honest, I didn't have that big a problem with it, but it offended a lot of people. So I haven't been to Europe in a while. But I always wondered why the rest of the world, not necessarily the citizens of these other countries, but the politicians who run these other countries, countries that we call friends, loved Joe Biden and hate Donald Trump, a person who clearly loves his country. MAGA, those red hats, MAGA should not be controversial. Make America Great Again is not controversial. But as I watch the coverage going to bed every night from many of these networks overseas, it all started to make sense. They are worse than the legacy media here. Al Jazeera is literally anti-Israel, just flat out, completely anti-Israel. And all the networks that I watched in English, in Italy, were so anti-Trump, they make MSNBC look like Newsmax. They make CNN look like Newsmax. I'm serious. I'm going to bed and my heart rate's going up. I'm like, no wonder they all hate us, because this is what they're exposed to. But they all love Joe Biden because Joe Biden was good for business. And Joe Biden never asked a lot of questions because he was not doing so well between the ears. As I've said many times, the proverbial cheese, a Gouda or a Gruyere, had slipped off the cracker. A lot of cheese in Italy, by the way. I missed Joe Biden on The View last week. That upset me. But as bad as things are for Joe Biden, the family is running out of money. Biden Inc. needs Joe Biden to stay in business. Nobody knows that better than old Doc Jill. And because no one is booking Joe Biden to speak at their events, he's charging $300,000 per speech. No one's booking Joe, so Jill decided to put Joe on a media tour, and it's going about as well as you'd expect.
Mr. President, since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. In the final year of your presidency, what is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. We found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues, and which I won't go into in the interest of time. One of the things that well, and
Alyssa, you know, one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us, and they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day.
Joe's charging $300,000 for a speech, and Jill, his wife, is now answering questions for him during interviews. And if you want to know the difference between Nancy Reagan, remember people said Ronald Reagan had dementia or Alzheimer's at the end of his presidency? The difference is what you just saw right there. Nancy Reagan would never do anything to embarrass her husband once he left office, but Jill does this because they need to make money. If you're a Biden, that's just part of life right there. That's business as usual. And the media around the world loved that family for it, and I've had enough. The media here pretended that that man was fit to serve another 4 years, and the media overseas continue to trumpet him around like he was some sort of hero. He was not. A corrupt, weak old man that never should have been elected, and we were talking about that weakness when he was running in 2019 and 2020 here on Newsmax, and the rest of the media are finally starting to catch up.